people still think about 3D printing as prototyping. We were probably one of the first products to use prototyping machines for final use parts. We would love to find another process that maybe is cheaper, faster, stronger, but I just don't know if it exists quite yet.
Today I spoke with Easton LaChappelle, an exceptional young entrepreneur and inventor known for his groundbreaking work in the field of robotics and prosthetics. Establishing his own company called Unlimited Tomorrow at the age of 17, Easton is so much more than a traditional engineer. Easton and his team utilize 3D printing and advanced robotics to create affordable, brainwave-controlled, customizable prosthetic limbs at what used to be considered an impossible speed. Easton and I talked about his journey and what sets his company apart, as well as taking a successful product and growing it into a successful company, and helping people on a global level, from focusing on perfectly matching sockets to not taking painted nails for granted. Here's my conversation with Easton LaChappelle. We live in a time where design and technology touch every aspect of our lives. But where did it all come from? Who designed it? How was it built and brought to market? What will it look like in a year, 2 years, 100 years? From the phones and smartwatches that help us in our day-to-day to the cutting-edge spaceships and 3D printers that are leading us into the future, modern design is constantly shaping the way we work, communicate, problem solve, and play. And every new design, big or small, starts with an idea and a bill of materials. I'm Majenta Strongheart, and this is The Bomb, where we talk to leading innovators in the tech world and celebrate the transformational power of design. Have you been to Siemens Realize live before?
No.
Okay.
I think I did a virtual session like a year or two ago, like in the middle of COVID.
Okay, got it.
I think they were trying to get me on like the actual like mainstream like stage.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad it finally worked out
this
year.
Yeah, well, you definitely are on the mainstream stage now. That stage is crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. And what they did with the graphics was wonderful. So
nice. Have you spoken to an audience that large before?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
you're like, I'm a pro.
My record is, which a humble brag, is about 18,000 people.
Wow. What was that for?
It was for a Microsoft event. It was at the Verizon Stadium in Washington, D.C.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
360 stage, standing on a screen, and that was like the peak of
kudos
speaking.
to you. How do you rehearse for those things? Are you like really, or are you just all the stuff and it's easy?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I get to talk about what I love and my journey, and so it's very natural. So no, I actually kind of maybe I'm a little bit weird, but I don't like to prep very much. Like I have like very simple, very basic bullet points or just like more transitions. But then, after that, it's just got to feed off the energy and, just let it flow.
That's awesome. Well, I'm impressed. I'm like, that's like a skill not everybody has, for sure. I like definitely have to prep for things, and I wish it was more natural. And I've even done like speech coaching and stuff before, and I still feel like I can always improve. There's always ways to grow.
I feel like I'm rough around the edges.
Yeah,
so.
no, I'm sure. Well, then this little podcast will be no problem for you. It's peanuts. So yeah, we can get started, and I would love to just start with kind of your origin story. I know you've told it a million times before and in a number of ways, I'm sure. But for those in the audience who may not be familiar with your work, at least the version that I've heard so far is that you already had created a robotic hand, right? When you were 14 years old, which is mind-blowing and very impressive. And then you had met an individual at a science fair who needed a prosthetic arm, and you couldn't believe how much they cost for this. It was a young woman, right?
Yep.
And so I would love to just hear it in your own words, how it grew from there.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, it's been a kind of a pretty wild journey. For context, I grew up in a small town in Colorado called Mancos, Colorado, about 1,200 people population. My graduating class of high school was about 23, so teeny tiny.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it actually motivated me at an early age to learn outside the education system. The public school I went to wasn't the greatest, and I quickly exhausted a lot of the math classes, and I was just craving more. And so I would run home, and luckily this was the age of internet, so I could tap into YouTube videos and open source communities and forums and just find like-minded individuals. And it really, I found just a medium of learning and creating. And the first project I created was a very simple robotic hand out of electrical tubing and Legos and fishing line. And this is like very proof of concept, taken a lot of time to create, a lot of failure, a lot of learning. And what I like to say is I created foundational knowledge. So after all that failure, I walked away with some great learnings and some great skills that then I could apply to the next creation. And over the next couple of years, I started advancing this very simple robotic hand to a full robotic arm that was 3D printed, at one point even controlled using brainwaves, and could toss a ball to you, shake people's hands, individual finger motion, a lot of really cool features. And I would enter those into the science fair. And this kind of monumental moment happened for me personally, where a small girl at the state science fair in Colorado came with my project, and I realized that she was wearing a prosthetic arm. And talking to her parents, realized that it had taken multiple months for that to be created, which is a problem for growing children, and it cost about $80,000. And it's very, very simple, essentially like a human-like claw. And and I thought, wow, this is really eye-opening to see this robotic hand that I built for a couple $100s with all these bells and whistles. There's got to be something better out there than just this claw. And after doing some market research, she pretty much had the best of the best for children at the time. And really motivated me to take kind of my passion for turning ideas into reality and apply that to helping people at a global level. So that was what really kind of ignited the spark in me.
Yeah, it's such an incredible story. And so how different is the current true limb model to what you had created that you were showcasing at that science fair?
Miles and miles and miles
Even
ahead.
though that one had like all these amazing sensors and controlled by brainwaves and able to catch and throw and all these things.
Yes.
Wow. I want to hear all about it. Okay, so let's get into it. How is it different?
Yeah, well, today, so the kind of our flagship product is called TrueLimb. It's a below elbow prosthetic arm and hand. It's completely robotic or bionic, so it has actuators, electronics, control system, muscle sensors. It's completely 3D printed, and we use all these technologies to make something that ultimately is just really easy to wear, to use, and something that's intuitive. Because it's 3D printed, we said, well, why not make each one unique so we can match skin tone? We currently offer over 100 skin tones. We also said, well, why make small, medium, large? What if we made them each personalized to the individual? So each TrueLimb is unique to the finger length, width, palm dimensions, forearm dimensions. And it's just a really rich back-end CAD system that allows us to produce these devices at a relatively fast pace.
Right.
We have machine learning integrated into this with our muscle sensors that we developed, a kind of a one-of-a-kind socket process that utilizes some great materials from additive manufacturing, some nylon that we use. You can paint fingernails. It looks very human-like. Just so many features.
So many special little details.
Lightweight,
that
long battery
really,
life.
Really probably impact the experience for the individual and make it the things you don't think about, like you said, painting nails, like that you take for granted, right? If you have them, that makes such a difference. And that's so sweet to include those different things. And so you said, I think it's kind of obvious probably to those of us who are kind of in the industry or, familiar with digital fabrication, but maybe you can just elaborate on why stick with 3D printing, even into, where you guys are at now. You've scaled, obviously, and you're not prototyping. And I think probably some folks really identify 3D printing or additive manufacturing with prototyping, whereas it can do so much more, right? And it's so much more sophisticated now, I think, in some ways, the most sophisticated way to produce some objects, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think a lot of people still think about 3D printing as prototyping. And I think we were probably one of the first products to use what was probably considered prototyping machines for final use parts. And we had to qualify the materials and the parts. And luckily, we have a great relationship with HP, and they make incredible 3D printers that print in engineering grade materials. And it's good enough. It's actually really, really quite good to print final use parts. And it allows it to be very affordable, fast to produce, lightweight. It's super customized. And it's very repeatable. And, I think when you combine all that together, it's hard to find a different manufacturing process that meets all that.
Yeah.
And, we would love to find another process that maybe is cheaper, faster, stronger, and even maybe give up a couple of these things, but I just don't know if it exists quite yet. We have to completely reinvent the product and probably look a lot like the other,
things
hands
that are
on the market.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes sense. And so I'm curious, I know that when I was doing a little bit of research, something that was important to you all is to be able to grow with the individual that's using the prosthetic, right? Because it does sound like you work with a lot of kids. And so how does that kind of work, whether it's the continuing to produce new prosthetics, but also I'm curious kind of on the business model side, how does that work with the clients you work with?
Yeah, we're obviously very passionate about working with children, and I think they're unfortunately kind of underserved demographic when it comes to prosthetics. A lot of times they're given metal hooks or claws, which from a psychosocial element, a lot of these kids are unfortunately probably bullied at school. And so by giving them a metal hook or claw, I don't know if you're really helping them on that side.
Yeah.
And so, when we look at serving, that market, we want to make something that is really enjoyable and inspiring to wear and, helps solve, some type of challenge that they might be facing, whether it's psychosocial, maybe it's functional, maybe it's both.
Mm-hmm.
We want to create a product for children that provides some type of value. Children grow, right? So it's almost like a pair of shoes. Every 12 to 14 months is the industry standard. You need a new prosthetic device. Sometimes it maybe is just a socket change, just given their growth rate. Other times it's maybe the full device just to make it proportionally sized.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, well, a lot of our costs are more on the internal components, the motors, which we use very high-end motors, the electronics, the batteries. What if we could upcycle those and 3D print a new
just
shell
like a new
almost?
skin. Yeah, wow, that's awesome.
And so, at the same time, the kid knows what they're going to be getting the next time. They can continue to customize it. And it also, for us, creates lifelong, customers, and that's really amazing. We have a really a sense of community around what we do, and I think it kind of checks all of our boxes, and I think we get to help a lot of people through that way.
Definitely. No, that makes sense. So I want to get back to kind of the path of your startup growing, because we have a lot of community members that may be interested in, starting their own startups, their own companies, or maybe are in certain phases of developing something like that or their own product. So there's so much that goes into taking, an initial solution that works and it's great, and growing it into a successful business. I would love to hear a little bit about your journey through that and how, what skills you felt you kind of brought to the table right away, and what were the things you needed support with or were crucial in that, growth process being able to happen.
Yeah, huge topic, and I could talk for hours. So
I'm sure.
Please cut me off. So, I had a very probably atypical startup launch experience. When I first started with, developing the actual prosthetic limbs after meeting the small girl, I was very fortunate that media just exploded. I was, magazines and, big time media interviews. One of my arms actually shook hands with President Obama at the White House Science Fair, which then ultimately led to a TED Talk I gave. And then from there, one of our primary investors, Tony Robbins, saw the TED Talk and said, I saw your interview
with Tony Robbins. I did watch that.
He gave me a call one day saying, I can't believe you're meeting world leaders, but still living in your parents' bedroom. Let me help you. And so for me, up until that point, I always looked at myself as a creator. Now I'm, kind of transitioning from a creator to an operator, and those are very different skill sets. And so, I was ready for the challenge, and my kind of internal motto is learn something new every day. And so I love learning. I was very passionate. But I was 18, right? So this is kind of daunting. I decided to forego college, jump straight into this. Knowing that I had to surround myself with brilliant people, I had to be very motivated. I had to be resourceful. And it's going to take some time. And so started, learning new skill sets, getting familiar with just the, kind of the business structures and just the kind of the go-tos and the normal things of just conducting business. And from there, we decided to be creative, and my goal was to not be a traditional medical device company. So in my early motto was to be for the people, by the people. And so early on, we went through an equity crowdfunding campaign where we raised money through an equity crowdfunding platform where someone could invest $100 or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and kind of crowdsource with outside of the VC network. So that allowed us to get started. Actually, it led to launching the product, and then found some incredible investors to help take things to the next level through that. But people in the team is absolutely everything. Early culture and values and mission is really important. And even today, we're a small, nimble team.
Yeah.
And so it's, to your point, it's you have to stay at what you're good at, where you bring the most value, and also know when to call other people in.
Definitely, that's key. And so, how big is the company now, roughly?
Yeah, we have about 15 people at the company.
Okay. And how many limbs are you producing, or products, are you getting out the door?
Yeah, I mean, as of today, we probably have a few hundred in the field. And, our goal, optimistic goal is to add a zero, every year. So, really focused on growth, going through just a lot of strategy of how we can optimize our socket process, DFM, just how can we make this very repeatable and fast to produce without sacrificing quality. We want to increase quality through those exercises.
And I'm curious, when you mentioned the customization process, do you 3D scan the other arm if they have another one to kind of mirror, or is it all just based on measurements and that sort of thing and kind of other data? Yeah,
we do something a little clever. Early on we thought about scanning the opposing limb, but then then the question is, what do you do with that scan? And working with 3D scans are not the easiest.
Yeah, I know. I have some experience there, definitely.
So what we do instead is actually really, really simple. We take a top-down photo with a known measurement. So in this case, a standard piece of paper. We know it's 8.5 by 11, top-down photo. And then from there,
you have kind of a standard model that that makes sense.
And we use 3D scanning to capture the residual limb geometry.
That makes sense.
And generally, that geometry is far simpler than a full hand.
Yeah.
And so that works great for 3D scanning. And then we marry the two.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I'm just thinking about the 3D scanning experience I've had in the past, and I'm like, sounds about right. I definitely think you're going the right route. And as you said, you guys are working on constantly kind of optimizing and making your processes more efficient. And I'm sure a huge part of that, I'm like subtle plug, is the digital twin and kind of digital thread that you're able to accomplish with some of Siemens' tools. So I'd love to hear about how you guys have used some of those tools and how it's helping, your process evolve and improve and, get to the next level.
Yeah. From a day-to-day perspective, we use NX. NX is kind of our bread and butter when it comes to the actual production and prototyping of these devices. We're really more of a socket company right now, and sockets are the most challenging part of a prosthetic device. You can have a very expensive, the highest end prosthetic hand in the world, but if it doesn't fit right, you have a paperweight. So we spend a lot of time and energy on the socket process. So once we have the 3D scan, we bring that into NX, and we have master models of sockets that then we can merge the two together. Okay, and we use Product Template Studio to help drive some of the variables and make things a little bit easier to edit. And our strategy is, because it's relatively low cost to produce sockets, we produce several of them for what we call a socket set that we then ship to the clinician or the customer. And so we have a nominal socket and then kind of a plus or minus where we might experiment and isolate other variables to then ultimately get to the best fitting socket as quickly as possible. So that's a lot of our kind of day-to-day, Siemens NX integration. And we recently started integrating Teamcenter X. Big fan of that because it's software as a service. So no servers or, big IT infrastructure. So it allowed us to be nimble, but still reap the benefits of a great platform.
Definitely. And so I'm curious, you mentioned, that you've kind of shifted into an operator role. When did you, if I understand correctly, the company's been around about 10 years. Is that right?
Started it February 12th, 2014. Okay. So we're coming up on it. Yeah.
And so when did you start to shift? How long were you wearing all the hats, but shift from more of an engineering focus for your individual role, to more of this business side and everything else?
Yeah, I would say the first couple of years were very much so, the garage phase. So it was doing everything from bookkeeping to filing patents to fixing 3D printers.
Yeah.
And then
do you miss those days at all?
I think those are like the glory days, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you're in them, it's like, oh, this
miserable,
it's a grind,
but then you look back.
And it's like, oh, that's
and you're like, I'd rather do that than deal with investors.
Yeah. Exactly. And now I would say a couple years in, then things started to change. Once we started actually having I would say working capital, that allowed us to, I could bring in people way smarter than I am for design and electronics and software. And that allowed me to be more of an operator and guide strategy and, still very much so involved with, product design and strategy on that side and, feature stack and different things. And more, I'm finding myself, how can I engineer myself to be more in that role because I just truly love it. And, I think it's just really exciting, and with how fast technology is moving as well. I think it's really incredible to see, new innovation come to life, and then for us to then integrate that in.
Be able to implement it so quickly. Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously there's a big issue with kind of medical devices and the market and how customers are able to access what they need and the insane price points. And we work on some assistive device projects at DesignLab, so we're a little bit familiar. Our main strategy in a lot of the projects we work on is to keep things open source so people can continue, developing on top of them, build off of one another. And, but even that has issues, of course. Not everyone that has these challenges is going to be able to build their own arm or know someone in their community that's going to build it for them. So it's not like that's solving everything. But I'm curious, what have been some of the greatest challenges in trying to get these solutions into the hands of the people that need them? Because I'm sure there's been a bunch of even bureaucracy and things and just the system being old and the way it is. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, there's just a lot to talk about here. And, I think the prosthetic industry is one of the few industries possibly that's just a bit legacy, right? It just hasn't changed much over the last, say, 100 years. The process of producing a prosthetic device is pretty much the same as it's always been. Plaster molds and thermoform plastics, a bit of trial and error, and then assembling a bunch of different components together for a solution. And throughout that process, there's a lot of insurance billing. That's where a lot of devices can, get well over $100,000. And the clinicians, rightfully so, need to make a margin through that. So there's a lot of layers to this. And knowing this, when I created the company, I said, well, I wonder if there's a different way of going about this. So initially, we actually launched direct consumer. We said, well, we can bring in these clinicians. We can bring in, everybody we need to have proper oversight, hopefully even better quality and better oversight, and, better clinical input than, maybe a traditional clinic that maybe doesn't see a whole lot of upper limb. And can we, really deliver that to the customer in an effective way? And so we set up our website that people can actually go on. They can fill out forms. They'll talk with our team, make sure that expectations are set, that we believe that this is the right fit for them, and they also believe this is the right fit for us, and go through that process. And so that's been really innovative. The industry was a little challenged by that, right? We kind of leapfrogged quite a few steps, is how I look at it. This wasn't, hey, we have a new innovative product. It's like we have an innovative product with a very kind of innovative distribution system. Right. And so, it was a full leapfrog. Yeah. So, I think some people in the industry, for probably makes sense, felt a bit challenged and, maybe threatened by a model like this. Other people embraced it, right? They want to see people get better technology.
You would hope that would be everyone's end goal,
Yeah, accessibility, affordability, making sure that things are done properly, of course. And that ultimately there's patient outcome associated with that. And, we do a lot of steps and we put a lot in place to ensure that, this checks all the boxes and then some across the board. So, I think for, being disruptive in general, I think you need to riffle a few feathers a little bit.
Grow a thick skin.
And, but I think that also says we're doing something right. And, there's also, there's equally the other side of the industry where it's embraced this innovation and because things are changing. And I think it would be more of a negative for probably the patients to not attempt or evaluate or actually implement these new technologies, because it could really make a significant impact for them.
Right, of course. And so the way you see As far as how you see the company growing, are you guys interested in expanding beyond the upper limbs eventually? Or are you more like, we'll focus on this one thing and just get it optimized and get it to as many people as possible?
Yeah, well, this is kind of the dilemma, right? Because there's so many ideas, there's so much technology. I mean, you can imagine all the technology that we developed that goes into TrueLimb. We could take a piece of that and commercialize it, and that's probably a business in itself. My goal for this is I want to master this business and this product. I want to see it help as many people as possible, and I think right now it's still very much so a full-time job to do that. Maybe in the near future, I'll have a little bit more bandwidth to start looking at some of these other technologies.
Do a few other companies here and there.
My philosophy is like we want to do things a little bit differently, but we want to create meaningful technology, and I kind of lump all this under human augmentation technology. So, there's a question. It's like, well, what if we could repurpose a prosthetic hand or a robotic hand and make a robotic glove? If someone has all their limbs but maybe no motor function, could we regain that movement back?
Wow.
It's not a major change per se, but it's a completely different industry, completely different marketing demographic, different things like that. So those are kind of some of the near-term things of how can we, just really utilize, what we've developed and take that to the next level and just continue to spread as far as possible.
It is a little bit of a shift, but I am curious to hear your perspective on, some of what you were discussing as far as traditional education versus you obviously took kind of a different route, got right into your work, and you're making an incredible impact on the world. I'm sure everyone could, speak to you being, above and beyond engineer as far as skill set wise and all of that. And so how do you feel like, have you thought much about, I'm sure you have, but how education's changing and how it needs to change? I have a feeling, in the next 10 years, it's going to be totally different. Obviously, there's a lot of different factors that play into it, what's going on with the economy, everything, but especially the fact that information is just so available in so many different ways, and more accessible. And, we also, this kind of is close to home for us because Hackaday is part of Supplyframe. And so, we're one of the largest open source hardware platforms and a huge kind of educational resource for folks. And so, where do you kind of see this going, or what do you think maybe needs to change in order for education to be more effective if it can be in the future?
Well, side note first, Hackaday is one of my few daily visits.
We love to hear it.
Absolutely love it. I've been following it for all of time, I feel like. So, you
can credit them to that first robotic hand, right? They were actually the beginning of us.
And, I was featured on it too, which is like the biggest win.
Yes.
So, there's a lot to talk about with education. And I think I had kind of an eye-opening experience. But the way I look at it now, I feel that access to information has always been there to a certain point. It's just really easy now. Like quite literally, I have, the Chat GPT on my home screen, and I use it a lot. And, even a year or two ago, it's like the internet is a tremendous platform and tool, but it's kind of, what you do with it is what matters. And so I think when I think about education, it's not so much we need to make better access to information. I think it's more about how can we ignite the curiosity of people to explore and experience. And, this sounds kind of like a weird story, but I was very fortunate again to have to do an internship at NASA at a young age. And for me, I thought, well, doing an internship at NASA, working at NASA would be my dream job, right? Making robots that go to space and all these different things. And my experience wasn't that. And I'm glad I did that, because I may have been on a different path. And, so I just look at it as like, the more you can immerse yourself, try things, experience things. Is this what I want to do? Does this make me really excited? Am I learning kind of without feeling like I'm learning? And, that's I think what's needed, or at least from my experience, kind of missing from my journey of education was, starting to immerse myself in some of these other, categories of careers. And seeing, is this something I can provide value to? Is something I'm going to enjoy? And just explore through experiences. Yeah,
I think that's an excellent point as far as what's really the issue, and it maybe not being necessarily the information that's available, but the kind of maybe the context or how things are run in a classroom or in any of these spaces. And I think it also speaks to the other side of things of, some people like yourself are very self-motivated, are curious, if they have, something ignited, they're able to run after it and, be probably a little more, again, self-motivated, whereas probably others need the structure of like a school day, but it doesn't mean that there's also, tons of area for improvement as far as that goes. So I appreciate, your point in that regard. And I couldn't agree more as far as, I do think that it really comes down to facilitators being able to spark that curiosity or figure out new ways and a little bit outside of the box, maybe more often, in order to inspire kids to be interested in exploring new things. And like you said, exploring new experiences and thinking about all the possibilities instead of feeling limited by the few things they're shown or exposed to. So I love that. And I think that's a great way to kind of wrap it up here. There's a million more things we could talk about. I feel like we didn't even get through half the questions I had sent you earlier, but I know that you have a busy day for the rest of the day and, want to get you to the next stage of the day. So thank you so much for the time. I'm going to ask you 2 last kind of rapid fire questions.
All right.
So what's one thing outside of technology that's inspiring you right now?
Ooh, this sounds a little maybe silly, but I just love nature. Right. And I think for me, there's, I love technology, but I think it's also kind of like, it's kind of our own worst enemy sometimes. And in today's world, it's so hard to escape it, right? Everything that we interact with from a technology is built to increase the interaction more and more. And so for me, being able to turn that off and change environment, I find myself just so much more curious and creative and, allowing my ideas to really flow and not get a notification that then stops that. So it's really simple, but it's something that I just always stays true to.
Of course. No, that makes sense. And you're not the first person to say that. So I will say that I think a lot of people can relate to that. You kind of need that balance and that space from, even if you are, someone who loves working with technology, you need some space and definitely for creativity and being able to kind of foster your imaginative mind. I think it's so important. So I agree. And then last but not least, what's on your personal bill of materials?
Gosh. I'm a big Microsoft fan. So, got the Surface and recently started switching some of my hardware to Apple. I'm a big fan of the AirPods Pro. Is very resistant to the AirPods, but I love them now. And, I really like big screens and multiple screens. And I think it's, trying to always tweak, kind of your own personal workspace. I'm left-handed. And so I find myself like always struggling to like adapt weird tools and like meters, just to be really efficient. So spending a lot of time just like tweaking things so I can be, when I'm in my flow state and like in my zone, I can create very effectively. And
I love that. And that's such a I feel like engineer answer. So it's like on brand for you.
Quite literally my bill of materials, yes.
No, it's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Easton. I really appreciate it. I know you've been the star of the show, so appreciate taking out the time for us. And I think you forgot something on your bill of materials, though. The open Hackaday tab is also on it.
Of course. Yes. It's every day.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all you're doing for the community out there. I think it's really incredible and inspiring to hear about.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And likewise, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really important.
That was my discussion with Easton LaChappelle, the engineer, entrepreneur, and inventor that disrupted his way into revolutionizing the prosthetic limbs industry and created a company that produces 3D printed, lightweight, affordable, multi-articulating prosthetic limbs with a realistic appearance. We talked about his journey and self-learning, the shift from a manufacturing position to an operations role, and his thirst for knowledge and also nature. If you like The Bomb, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Supplyframe and Hackaday on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and DesignLab at Supplyframe DesignLab on Instagram and Twitter. The Bomb is a Supplyframe podcast produced by me, Majenta Strongheart, and Ryan Tillotson. Written by Maggie Bowles and edited by Daniel Ferreira. Theme music is by Anna Hogbin, show art by Thomas Schneider, special thanks to Giovanni Salinas, Bruce Dominguez, Thomas Woodward, Jin Kumar, Jordan Clark, the entire Supplyframe team, and you, our wonderful listeners. I'm your host, Majenta Strongheart. See you next week.